Call this work session to order. We'll start with introductions. Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Austin Quinn Davidson.
Thank you.
Felix Rivera.
Forrest Dunbar.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne France.
John Reynolds.
Pete Peterson.
Dick Trey. Bill Paulson. Mark Stafford.
Right.
Heidi Thomas.
Great. Okay. This is part 2 of the presentation we started yesterday. Is that right?
Correct.
So we want to hit the lights, Madam Clerk, and we will begin.
So I'm just going to, start before Mark rolls into it, just to remind people, the idea behind this financing is what we've done all along. It's just akin to getting construction financing when you build a house. So we want to enter into agreement. The only thing I wanted to say is we have our bond counsel here, Cynthia Weed, as well as our municipal advisors that help us to construct these transactions. So if you had any specific technical questions, they're here to answer them. Otherwise, we'll just let Mark talk about the rates.
Okay. Let's press forward with Mark's presentation and see if there's any questions after.
Okay, so we'll just pick up where we left off yesterday, and I'll introduce Heidi Thomerson, who is our finance director, and she's going to talk about the proposed rate impacts that the recommendations included in the master plan will, what it means to the municipality. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Heidi Thomerson. I'm the Finance Director for Solid Waste Services, and we're going to turn now to talk a little bit about the rate analysis and what the proposals you've heard will do to the rates. But even more importantly, I think we need to talk about the financial health of the two utilities. So we'll combine that conversation here. What we have here is a picture of our rates for the landfill, the Anchorage Regional Landfill. As you can see, what we've done for many, many years is hold a steady rate, and when there's a rate increase, it's a large jump, and then a steady hold for a long period of time. I'd submit to you that this is not best business practice and probably a little harder on our customers than a small increase each year over time, something that's easier to adjust to. You can also see as we move forward from 2018 on, with those incremental annual adjustments, we're still well below where we would be had we been just adjusting to the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, over years. We're still considerably below. So as I mentioned, I would like to discuss the financial health of the utilities. Part of our analysis, something that came up as we were doing the analysis, is that the utilities have for a long time operated without written financial policies or just financial guidance in place to ensure the health of the utilities. And what we would like to do, along with our rate adjustments, is to consider maintaining 60 to 90 days of operating cash reserves, maintaining a reserve equal to 2% of our capital assets for capital improvements. We have a lot of large equipment and stuff breaks, and sometimes it breaks unexpectedly, and we need those reserves to help cover that. We also want to look at systematically reinvesting in our business with this reinvestment funding with items, non-cash items such as depreciation, to cover things like debt service and to set aside for capital costs, our annual capital costs. And in all of that, we do need to keep an eye to the dividends and the revenue requirement dividend that we pay back to the municipality to protect that for the municipality. And you might ask where we came up with these ideas, and we didn't just make them up. They are best practices that are suggested by the Governmental Finance Officers Association, for which this municipality is a member of. And we feel it would be wise to look at those best practice recommendations and incorporate them into our utilities.
I'm going to pause. Note for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Croft.
I'm sorry?
I had to, go ahead.
Okay, so as we get into the rate analysis, And how we're going to fund this proposal, as I said, we looked at it, we thought, Houston, we've got a problem.
Good ice cream.
As I said, we have two utilities, the disposal utility, which is the central transfer station, the Anchorage Regional Landfill. This is where small contractors, individuals from the communities, and even larger businesses come to deposit the waste, drop off their trash. Then we have the collections, the refuse collections utility, which is the utility that goes out to individuals' homes and collects their trash, and we also offer curbside recycling, and that utility picks up that trash and brings it back to the transfer station or landfill. Here you have a slide that gives you a picture of what I've been discussing. The green bar there is our expenses over the next few years if we don't change anything. That's just if we continue to operate the way we are. And then the blue line going across is our revenues, which are fairly flat. Since we service, we service all of Anchorage, but the population growth, the new homes, that kind of thing, is not growing that much. So our revenues are pretty much flat and have been flat for several years. So you see where we've got a problem. That flat line is going below where our expenses are growing. And the red line would be our projected rate increases, what they would do to our revenues. The purple bar being what our expenses would look like if you approve this proposal that we're making to construct a new transfer station for the disposal utility. Those of you that are more numbers people, here we have the actual numbers with that. I'd like to draw your attention to the about 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. The operating deficit, if we take no action, where we are in 2018, we're already looking at closing the year with a potential deficit in our revenues over expenses, and that will only grow over time. So we need to take action, and now is the time to take that action. Down below, even with the construction of the new central transfer station, looking at the short-term borrowing plan that's been proposed, where we're just paying incremental interest payment over time, with the rate increase for the disposal utility of 6.25%, you can see we come back into the black over the next couple of years. Questions? Oh, there is.
Yeah, Ms. Quinn Davidson.
A couple slides ago, you showed us a graph of the CPI and then the
Yes.
rates. Why haven't you updated rates more consistently to try to keep pace with the CPI? Is it SWS that sets the rates?
SWS can set the rates. We come before this body, the assembly, to set rates each year. We have for a long time, go back there, obviously operated doing more with less. I'm fairly new to solid waste services. I've come on in June, and so this is what I have seen has been done. I cannot really speak to the decision as to why that was done. I don't know if there's more color for that.
I mean, I can only guess, as to why. I mean, because it's not easy,
Right.
all the time to sit here and do this every year, and if it's not part of the culture of the organization, which it hasn't been, as you can see.
But doesn't it seem harder to every few years than say, oh, we have this big rate increase, rather than just having something that consumers are used to?
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Yeah,
And I think-
Chris.
and that's what we're
John.
trying to drive towards.
Great.
So if you could move forward to that slide that had the table of finance at the bottom. So you briefly discussed, I think it's the 5th line down, annual expenditures with the transfer station. I don't understand that line. What does that mean? Because expenditures with no action, it's 24,934, and then 24,936, $2,000 more.
The line expenditures, no action would be no new transfer station. So just carrying on expenditures as they are today. We anticipate they're going to grow year over year with inflation. You do see a minor dip there from 2018 to 2019. some of that is due to the dividend on revenue that I discussed earlier, that we pay a dividend based on revenue, but when there is a net loss in the net position, then we would not pay a dividend. So you see a dip because we're anticipating a net loss for 2018. So we're anticipating we would not pay as large of a dividend, if any, in 2019. But when we have that growing back.
Yeah, okay, so, but I'm still trying to grasp what the difference is between expenditures, no action, expenditures with the central transfer station project. I mean, it's a marginal number, a couple $1,000s.
Right.
What is the difference of expenses?
The difference in expenses is that interest on the short-term borrowing plan. What we have done is consider if we draw on that short-term borrowing plan each year based on the amount of the new transfer station that we anticipate we would have completed in that year. Say in 2019, the engineering design study is done. We would only be paying an interest payment on the short-term borrowing plan, and there may be some cost of obtaining that financing. And that cost of the new construction would just grow incrementally over time.
Okay, so then by the end of the term, 2021, it's up to $500,000. I mean, that seems like reasonable in perspective. So, okay, that's the shift between short and long-term debt.
I guess what, this anticipates that we would buy the Walmart property this year, and so that $2,000 differential is just the incremental interest we would be incurring in December on that.
Okay, and then finally, what accounts for the increase in revenue down in the last line?
What accounts the net revenue increase line is considered. This is considering that we would increase the rates for dropping trash at the central transfer station.
Okay, it's a rate increase, not
Right,
it's
it's
not.
a rate increase.
Yeah, it's
Those
just a
rates
rate.
for the disposal utility.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Welton and Mr. Trainee.
Following along Chris's questions there, so if you put in the new central transfer station, then we pay a couple thousand this year, and then it's up 120,000 the next year, and then it goes up till it's about 500,000 more in 2022. And I understand we're replacing this transfer station because it doesn't function well now. We're going to do something fancy new, which presumably would be cheaper to maintain, with lower maintenance costs. It's brand new. I mean, why would, and then financing costs should be flat for decades or whatever, right? So why are we getting this big increase over these years?
Right, thank you for the question. Okay, I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to answer from what I understand, and then I'll let the others who know jump in if I don't make it clear. But in the construction, we have in here, as Alex just said, the plan for the land this year in 2018. We would just have expense for design and engineering in 2019. Then what we have done is looked at the construction and said how much would feasibly occur in a given year, and it grows as more construction, larger items, more expensive items, the farther you get into construction, so it grows greater.
So would 2022 probably be that 500,000 increase? That would be steady state?
I think it even grows beyond that, because that 500,000 looks at a couple of things, is the construction and the cost of the items that we construct in that year, and borrowing more. And then at some point, as Alex discussed yesterday, when we hit a threshold, I think our anticipation was maybe in the $50,000 range, $30,000 to $50,000, we would have to convert to revenue bonds, which would increase the debt service in that year as well. So it's growing the interest in the debt service on those notes, using short-term borrowing and then increasing to revenue bonds along the way, then continue with more short-term borrowing. So you do see different amounts in each year.
Okay, so that's paying for it, but we're buying it because we'll be more efficient and operate. And efficient usually means cheaper. So maybe Mark, can you tell us, are we getting something that we can run and?
I mean, that's going to be the intent, right? It's going to be to have a facility like that. I mean, the intent is not to grow the department or have to add additional people because we're adding, more and more services. And so we're trying to keep that to a minimum. I don't know exactly what those numbers are going to be as far as like an annual maintenance cost is concerned, because we're just not that far along, in the design process to be able to make that kind of determination. But every year, once we get past that, once we have a design and once we have a better idea about what the maintenance activities are going to be related to those new facilities, we'll be able to refine our, estimates for annual O&M expenditures every year. But it's a heavy duty environment. I mean, you weren't here yesterday, John, but it's what Andrew said. One of our consultants from Tetra Tech is like the first day the transfer station opens is like the first day of demolition. You know what I mean? Because it's just because of the nature of the business with hundreds of thousands of pounds of trash, going over the floor every day, and large vehicles and equipment being it up on a regular basis.
But you haven't figured in cost savings from more efficient operation in these dollars, is that right?
Not for this operating cost seen here. What we have determined, and we talked about it yesterday briefly, is that what we're expecting with an enhanced facility is to be able to better divert waste from the landfill phase and be able to divert materials to recycling. And so as such, what that does is that basically extends the life of the landfill, and every year that we keep the landfill open, I mean, as you can see, we've got $24, $25 million a year asset that we have there. So every year that we can extend its life is that associated revenue that comes with that every year. So,
All right, thanks.
What's Mr. Trainee and then Ms.
Mark,
Davidson?
Go back in time. You remember the year that Mayor Sullivan pulled money out of solid waste? About $2 million.
That came out last night.
I remember when Mayor Sullivan did it. I remember when Mayor Wirtz did it. Yes.
Remember that time period? Because this utility was healthy, and all of a sudden money was transferred to make
Still healthy.
the budget work. Go ahead.
But remember, we haven't changed rates since then.
I know.
But our costs have continuously gone up.
The money that was there is now gone, so now I have to look at what do we do with figure making the rates go higher. So wait a second. The question, second part is, Dean, can you take a look at this CPI and figure out how we can adjust the program automatically every 2 years, bring it from the assembly if we have to, however, to have a program to adjust the CPI? Because what I don't want to do is 3 or 4 years, then we've got to raise it, increase a lot because we haven't given a CPI. I'd like the fact, if you can work ordinance for me, I'd appreciate it. Because we should have, like we do with some of our other increase with the CPI going on. Thanks, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Ms. Quinn Davidson, then Mr. Peterson.
Just quickly back to Mr. Welton's comment on this. I'm wondering if part of it is that by 2022 that new facility wouldn't be constructed. I'm guessing it would take a long time, so that you'd still be operating under the old facility, hence the need for maintenance of it. That's
Right.
That is correct.
Actually, Mr. Constant and then Mr. Peterson.
Thanks. So interesting the conversation about that transfer from solid waste should come up, because it was very much a topic at a community council last night. Again, people aren't forgetting that, especially those who had to pay it. And the question I have is it possible, or will you have for us a slide that kind of demonstrates the operating costs outside of this capital investment? Because this is a major investment. It would be nice to see the projection of your operating costs without this in it, because this can be a little confounding. Thank you.
yeah, we in fact we have that. So.
Beyond the line that's here, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I am typically not a member of the enterprise committee, so I know that if the electric utility, when they want to increase their rates, they have to go to the regulatory commission. We have to go through the regulatory commission to raise rates here.
We're not economically regulated by the RC. It's been strictly assemblies.
Great, thank you.
It's a very good question, Mr. Peterson. Let's try to push forward with this presentation a little bit before we have more questions.
Okay, and this is for the collections utility, the refuse collections. As I said, this is the part that goes out to private residents and collects the trash. Same things, the green bar is our current expenses if we don't change anything, no new construction, and our revenues here, which are also flat, and over time, our expenses are going to exceed our revenues. I would like to say that today, both utilities are pretty good with the operating cash reserve. We are above 60 days in the utilities, but the picture you're seeing here in both of these slides is that in the next year to year and a half, they're going to slip below that, and we have not set aside for those capital 2% reserves that are recommended in best practices. So I'm not telling you that the utilities are completely financially unhealthy today. We're slipping down that slope, so now is the time to consider this and to act, is the point I'm trying to make. Here are the numbers for the collections utility, and I'd like to point out that we are looking at only a 5% increase for the residential collections in our rates, and this would be, again, for those customers that we go out and pick up at their home. So the rates, they aren't combined, is what I'm trying to say, is nobody's going to see an 11% increase, just a 5% increase is what we're recommending here. Makes sense?
Can I
Sure.
can I see your next slide, and then I'm going to ask you a question?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, let's go back to the previous slide then. So, because I want to see if you address this. To me, it makes, the conversation we had yesterday was about the incredible financial benefit to the city of extending the life of the landfill. It's also the case that SWS is not the waste disposal utility, collections utility, I should say, for the whole city, right? So wouldn't it be more, and it's also the case that our collections utility is not in the red, not as far in the red as our disposal utility, and it doesn't look like it will be in bad shape as disposal going forward. Given those three things, doesn't it make more sense to focus the rate increase on disposal utility rather than the collections utility? Both because it would change the incentive structures for people to dispose, and also because it would shift, that cost would go to everyone in Anchorage as opposed to just the folks downtown, right? Because everybody has to use the landfill.
We have taken a look at that and do get what you're saying. And so what we did for this analysis is split the asset. About 40% of it generally goes to the collections utility. The collections utility does own the administrative building that we operate in and the warm storage building that is on the central transfer station site to store those vehicles. And since that is part of the new construction, we are estimating that some of the new construction will affect this utility and those customers that do receive services through this utility. So that's why the rate increase, recommended rate increase here is lower, is again to set the financial health of this utility by itself to allow for those cash reserves and for the capital reserves for the items that are owned by this utility, our vehicles, the admin building, the warm storage, those types of things. And we will very carefully analyze this as we move forward and get that engineering design information. And that's the other thing is we're recommending right now just the 1 year, the 2019 rate increase. That will allow us to go back and look at our rate models and how we've divided those assets and see if in fact more goes to disposal and we don't need such increase here.
Excuse me.
Or we need more. We will true it up each year.
How do our SWS rates compare to the private utilities or the private waste collections companies throughout town? And are they looking to do a rate increase as well? Not that we would control it, but in general, do you know, are they looking to do rate increases?
They're going to have to. I mean, just depending on, if our disposal rates increase,
Yep.
their overall costs are going to increase, associated with whatever our rate increase ultimately ends up being. So my expectation is that, I can't speak for them obviously, but that their rates are going to change slightly. I would go out on a limb and say it would probably be equivalent to like what our residential customers are going to see as well. And so in our rates, as far as residential collection, it's not really apples to apples because with our service we include recycling, whereas with service, with anyone outside of our service area, it's two separate services, right? So you can choose whether or not you want to have recycling. You just don't get a recycling cart like you do in our service area. And so they have there's one charge for your trash, and then there's one charge for recycling. But if you combine both of those as an Alaska Waste customer, our rates are equivalent with what theirs are right now. And we haven't had a rate increase for residential service, I think, since 2009, 10, something like that. It's been, 8 or 9 years.
So what's the if there's no RCA oversight on waste utilities, which I didn't realize?
There isn't. We are not regulated. Everyone outside of
Okay,
our
good.
collection areas, like Alaska Waste, Blue Arctic, North
Okay.
Waste.
That makes sense. All right, so who's all in the queue? Chris and Dick, go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Okay, thanks. So you asked one of my questions, which was rate comparison. But that led to another question. So if this makes it look like the collection services use the transfer station to dump and then have it moved to the landfill, is that correct?
Correct.
So then if the rates go up for the transfer station, then inherently the rates have to go up for the collections, right? Because if you don't do that, then you actually create another broken link in the system.
Correct.
Thanks.
Something I would like to point out for this body as well is I talked about, stepping back to disposal, the 6.25% increase. When you see our budget proposal, I had put a 5% increase in there. That budget was prepared before we completed this analysis, and we found a few things in our calculation, and that caused us to realize we do need 6.25. So for the budget that will be presented to you, our revenues will be a little higher than what's in the budget because we have realized we need to do this 6.25.
So just a
I
quick
just
follow-up.
wanted to make that clear in case you've already looked at that.
Go
So
ahead, Mr. Constant.
does your analysis on the collections matrix account for the 6.25% increase?
It does. We've built in an inflationary increase, so it should cover the 6.25 increase. It should cover other increases. We've built in increases for, say, labor costs and those kinds of things. Yes.
So what does this curve look like if you don't do the increase?
If we don't increase,
Yeah.
we have the no action expenditure line there.
But that's no action based on this, not no action based on the 6.25%, right? That would be another line.
Yeah, I'd have to dig into those numbers to really separate that. You have
Thank
to
you.
keep in mind the 6.25 also is just the cost of the disposal of the trash that we take in, there are other operating costs.
So it's only a small portion of
I
that.
still have incremental, yeah, so I'd have to tear that apart to
Okay.
answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Trainee?
Thank you. Mark, as I understand it, we have mandatory collection within the old city limits. But outside that, you've got waste management, and people do not have to have garbage picked up there. You have mandatory, you have to belong to it, have collections within the old area that you guys service. But waste management, people can either take it or not. And that's a problem we've got because we don't have mandatory citywide. So it's a problem, and we have to make sure, from my perspective, that we cover our cost of disposal facility, because both waste management and solid waste have to dump the products there. I guess we can't call it dump anymore, have to process their. Anyway, just keep in mind
I think you can
that
use
part
the
of my
verb,
district is
just not the
downtown.
noun.
Because within this area, part of my semi-district is waste management. And my people that are mandatory collection have a real hard time because why do I have to take it when waste management area, people don't have to take it? It's just how it works. It's not always fair. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Okay, there's no other questions. You continue with the presentation.
Okay, so I wanted to bring this home to actual numbers. This is looking at our collection utility and looking at residential service for the average residential customer. We determined that the 64-gallon cart is the most popular, and that current rate is $26.56 per month. The rate that we have proposed is $27.62 per month for that customer. So you can see with the rate increase, 5% is a number out here somewhere. What it really comes down to is less on the cost of a soda per month or coffee, is your pleasure. And I believe that this type of rate increase each month is manageable for our customers as opposed to the big jumps, as you all have mentioned as you look at the other ones. And we also have the 3 cubic yard dumpster service 2 times a week, which is our most popular commercial rate, increasing from $250 per month to $263.
Okay.
Okay. So further questions at this time? I thank you for your attention.
Mr. Trainee, Mr. Croft, and then I've got a
If we have
question.
a copy of this, give it to our clerk, so they can put it on the website. Because many people have questions on this, I'd like to let them be able to go to the website
Yep.
and download this.
Yeah, I actually was going to speak with the clerk about the prior, yesterday's presentation as well. If we could get both of those up on the website, I think that would be great. So one about the purchase and construction of the new site, and then one about the proposed rate increase. I think those are both things we'd like to have on the. Have you sent those? Do they have those in their possession?
Yeah, we made some minor changes today, but it's all the same presentation. So
Okay.
we'll have like the master plan, the finance plan, and then the rate stuff.
And Mark, can you email that to me, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Oh, I'm sorry. We've been joined by Mr. Dyson, and we've got Eric in the queue. So we'll Eric, me, Fred, John.
Just a second, do you have a slide of the real estate where the map was?
Yeah, yes.
If you could put that up for me, it'd be helpful. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, and that was in yesterday's presentation had that stuff as well. Okay, Mr. Croft.
Your slide that is comparing to the CPI uses the solid waste disposal rate per ton, and it seems to contemplate a series of increases over the next 4 years. Is that right? It goes from 18 to 22 on the slope. So that you put there, is that what we will eventually get to, or just next year's increase? When you had the commercial and that was collection, of course, but I guess do you have the same plans for collection that you appear to do for a disposal for a 4-year schedule of increases, and what do those top out at?
Yes, the plan is moving forward to have continual small incremental rate increases for both collections and disposal. And we didn't have it shown during the presentation, but taking that out to 2026, 27, there's continual rate increases. And now, of course, what we're going to do every year is just depending on the sequence of construction, what we put into service, because once we put stuff into service, it transitions from the short-term borrowing program to the long-term revenue bonds, which are a different interest rate, different loan period, or different payment. You're paying interest as well as principal. So that'll kick in too. And so what we're expecting is that rate increase may, increase slightly. Hopefully, it'll decrease slightly every year. As we go further along with actually like how much the facility is going to cost. Because when you're looking at the $114 million that we're showing up there, that's the worst case scenario. And we've got like a 10% design, and so we're nowhere near really being we're within that range, but we don't know with a high level of certainty where exactly that cost of construction is going to lie. So you could have anywhere from, assuming that we go with the property acquisition concept, I think that number's from 70, 80 million all the way up to 106. So it could be anywhere between those ultimately.
I guess then there's other people in the queue, and we have a busy day, but somewhere between the not doing any rate increases for 16 years and doing it every year is I think the better policy is probably a bump of some significance that gets you back close and then giving people a rest. I'm not sure that either one, I know the no increase is sustainable. I'm not sure that $1 a year and people don't know where it ends is going to be very popular. I think it's probably better to do this a couple of years and then an increase that catches you up. But that's your decision and what you want to recommend to us.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. So I have two questions, neither directly related to the rate increase. The first is, so you talk about this range of potential costs for the new transfer station, and I know that a lot of that's just, we don't know what we don't know, and it could be anywhere, like I said, 80 million to 105 or 114, something like that. If we were to, you don't have the graphic right now with all the different buildings and stuff on there. Okay, here, great. If you had to not build one of these buildings, or build one of these buildings significantly smaller because we decided that 105 was just intolerable, that we needed to bring it down to 80 or 90 million, what would be the thing out of here that you would leave off?
I can't answer that right now because I just haven't thought about that enough. I think as we move further along, we'll be able to make that kind of determination, and we'll be able to do that every year based on what the will of the assembly is. Because it's not like when you guys approve, if you approve the finance plan, it doesn't mean that gives us a credit card to go spend $106 million on whatever we want. It's still going to have to come in front of this body every year to approve our capital expenditures as well as our operating budget, which will have our proposed rate increases that are associated with what we're building or not building.
Well, I mean, it's clear in the short term, the first thing we have to do is purchase the land, and that's unavoidable. That's the thing we have to do if we want to go forward at all with this. And then there are some things I think intuitively that, we have to find a way to replace or improve the tipping floor. I mean, that's obvious, right? But then beyond that, I do think as we go forward, we'll have a conversation about, is this something we need or is this something we want, right? And is this something that really will prolong the life of the landfill? Is this something that will pencil out? Or is this something that we can't really, that we might need to do without because our customers don't feel that a rate increase is something that they can tolerate? The second thing, which is totally different from this, but it just sparked my memory because you had the slide with the most popular can size. And I've had conversations with one of the private providers about bear-resistant containers, and I'm getting two different kind of stories. One is that the only bear-resistant containers available are the largest size. But then I've had people say that no, in Juneau actually they have a variety of sizes of bear-resistant containers. Which of those is accurate? And because that's where the real price jump is for folks. It's not going from regular to bear resistant. It's going from I have a regular 32 or whatever it is to now I have to go all the way up to 96, or I might be getting the exact numbers wrong. But so can you tell me?
So that's both are correct. So we use a specific vendor for our roll carts. That vendor is finally now catching up with what some of our partner solid waste utilities have had as far as like who their vendor is and who their manufacturer is of their bear cart. And so currently we offer 96 gallon as well as 64 gallon, and we're in the process of purchasing, I believe, 32 gallon bear resistant containers to kind of meet that. We don't want to hurt somebody because they want a bear resistant container and we don't offer the small size available. And like what we've done is I've tried to reiterate to our staff that if somebody has a smaller can size and we don't offer that size in a bear resistant container, that we need to charge them what their current size is. But hopefully we're going to get past that here in the very near future when we get those smaller bear carts.
Well, when it comes to human-bear interactions, though, you are the smaller part of the problem. I mean, just by nature of where your service area is, it's slightly less an issue. Is there anyone here from Alaska Waste? Okay. I have met with them, and they expressed that, no, 96 is the only one we can do. And I'm wondering why that's the case. Are they using a vendor that is not catching up in the way you're describing?
That's not my understanding, Horst, but I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Okay. All right. I've monopolized the competition enough. Who was next in the queue? Was it John? Then Pete.
Yeah, a couple of things. One thing was said, as far as residential pickup outside of solid waste services, there are actually two now, Alaska Waste and Blue Water. I don't want to forget about them, because they're growing. And I think there's at least 3 other commercial dumpster places, So, and also, I hope we're not paying full price for that piece of property, because Walmart's motto is we sell for that.
That's good.
Well, actually, I have, if Robin Ward, I haven't been able to call, she's been a big help, she's our real estate agent, obviously, so she can talk about the negotiations and where the property price and acquisition is at.
Right now, we have determined the price, and yes, it was a hard-fought negotiation. They wanted $18,500 for it. We went back and forth for probably 6 weeks to determine it. I thought that was too much. It was an unfair price, given the fact that we have to deal with wetlands and there's deed restrictions on the property. So we finally negotiated and was able to land it. Would we end at 14.5? 15.1. So I don't think we're overpaying for the property given these circumstances, but we're down to the very last minute little fine print in purchase and sale. I would imagine that by the time that this goes to the assembly next week, we should have the final draft purchase and sale ready to execute.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, we have the lot on the top of the page there that is part of the purchase, but we don't really have plans to use that. Would there be a possibility that we might be able to find a buyer for that part of the area? I mean, I know most businesses don't want to locate next to a transfer station, but that we might be able to get some of our investment back and lower our payments a little bit. What do you think about that, Rob?
You're talking about the portion that is closest to the highway.
Close to the sewer highway area.
We're going to take title to that, but remember this does come with some deed restrictions. So I've already talked to the commercial agents. They actually have someone who may be interested in a long-term lease, which might be more beneficial to us to do a long-term lease, and then at least have the opportunity for further expansion in the future.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good idea, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. So the revenue bonds are paid for by the ratepayers ultimately. So I just have to say that I, of course, am wholeheartedly in support of finding ways to spread those costs generally and not just along the tiniest part of our town, the old and historic neighborhood. So any way that can be built in is a better deal for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Dyson?
Thanks, Robin. When did we appraise that property at?
It has not been appraised yet.
That's what you're paying it on the books, tax.
The Walmart property,
Yeah.
we haven't purchased the Walmart property yet.
No.
Understand.
Assessed.
Assessed.
What was
What's the
the
appraised value?
city's
Assessed
appraised
value.
Oh,
value?
the assessed value
Okay.
on it.
Assessed value.
I'm gonna have to go back and look. I'll have to, it was less than the purchase price, which is really normal for commercial property. This is I2. I'll find that assessed value.
Maybe offline you explain it to me. My understanding of state law is that the assessed value's got to be the real market value.
As close as you
I
can
was
get.
probably the property assessor.
That's language you did that later.
When it's lower, assess is lower. People still complain about
Yeah,
it.
of course.
Actually, that does occur. That is another factor. I mean, it's probably a large factor, but we're going to lose whatever property taxes they're currently paying on this. Correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Yeah. Although you do pay a use, all right? Okay, that's fair. All right. Other questions about this presentation? We have 5 hours of hearings ahead of us, so maybe we take 15 minutes. Do you have any concluding thoughts, or?
I have maybe a question, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you covered this. Doesn't look like there's good access for trucks going in there. Did you already cover that and have a plan for that?
Mark?
Yes, we did. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be pretty much the same access that we have now with some additional, ins and outs of the facility. So it's actually the vehicle traffic is going to improve with the new facility.
Okay. But there's gonna be more traffic on all those roads as a result of our utilization.
Well, we're not, since our customer base isn't really expanding as part of this, the traffic volume should remain relatively the same.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fred, they're gonna have the commercial vehicles dropping stuff off on the right-hand side, and then the individuals will be dropping their stuff on the left-hand side.
Is it?
Is that correct?
Yeah, we can have Andrew from Tetra Tech walk through that real quick for us.
Andrew Shelbert with Tetra Tech. Just to run through yesterday, what some of you may have missed. What we're looking to do with this design is, right now all the traffic is concentrated, of course, adjacent to the existing properties. One of the main goals we're looking at is separating our residential traffic, okay, which will have a similar path to what it uses now, and ultimately it'll be reserved for the northwest portion of the existing CTS property. The commercial and small haulers, all our commercial will be coming in off of 56 to go across the new scale location. And then they'll actually go into the transfer station, and then depending on whether the commercial haulers have a tear weight on their trucks, they'll have an option to either exit out Dowling, so we're diffusing some of our exiting traffic to either East Dowling, or if they don't have a tear weight registered with SWS, they would come back across the exit scale and come out this way. Our commercial folks, small commercials, people with trailers, pickup trucks, they have the opportunity to, of course, go into the reuse center initially, and then what they would end up doing is coming back across the 56 and then enter the new complex over here with another scale location or booth, and then access the transfer station from an opposite side. So we're actually distributing the traffic a lot, to a greater extent than is currently utilized at the central transfer station.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Do you have something, Barbara? What's that?
Question for them.
Yeah.
On Dowling, exactly where you're going to be heading, coming out of Dowling at?
Dowling, we've got a one-way exit on Dowling. You can see this route right here.
Okay.
Try to be focused, and that's the exit ramp for that. To come
So
in.
how close to the intersection is that going to come out? In the middle of the block, or?
Yeah, we've maintained required distances between existing intersections. What we did that was part of the move for the way we have our main commercial entrance off of 56.
It'll be between
Just making sure.
and the car shops that are right there off of
Right across the new car shop around there?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Close to that.
There's a road there that, for example, Able Body Shop parks some of their cars there. I know that our enforcement people have been moving them out of there. So I think it's still the dedicated road for a long time. There were 30 or 40 cars there.
Yeah, those are. I drive by there, a few times a
Is
week.
that
to
the
make sure
same
they're-
way you're going to have the cars come out?
That's where they're. Yes. Yep.
Okay. So that's down from the roundabout, but right across from the new car dealership that just built their facility there. That should be there.
It's close to that. Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Constant?
Yeah, two things. How many lots are there, Robin?
There's actually a total, I believe,
Four?
of six.
Oh,
lots.
6?
4 of them are large and there are 2 small ones.
Yeah, I didn't see. So I added up the 4 large lots, and it came out to be around $8 or $9 million. So with the smaller lots, it'd probably be assessed close to 10.
I believe you're fairly close.
And I would just editorialize slightly, and this is no fault of your own, but 2 lots in the north of town, surrounded by a whole nightmare. We paid under assessed value, and here we're going to pay substantially more. And that's just something for people to pay attention to because of the net impact of policy decisions. We are taking people's livelihoods. And this is introduced on the 11th, so is this on the agenda for Tuesday?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
On the 23rd.
Great. Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to close this work session.